For all you real estate investors that have some experience, you bought some properties, maybe done some syndications, and you're thinking about going to the next level, maybe creating a fund, I've got a real estate attorney coming in to walk us through some of the do's and don'ts that you want to look out for when creating a fund.
One other way of investing is through a real estate fund.
Right.
If an investor group wants to bring investors in and has a, rather than just one property in mind, has a type of property that they want to purchase. Let's say they want to buy industrial properties in major urban areas, or they want to buy shopping centers with grocery and drug combination, or something like that, or multifamily in any state. What they can do is they can set up what's called a real estate fund. What that fund is again, it's an LLC. There's an operating agreement to it, and it allows for investors to invest in and still get their distributions in accordance with a waterfall. Generally, they get their capital back first, and then there's a split on returns between the investor and the manager. But what it does, instead of just defining one property to invest in, is it defines a type of property. So rather than raising $10 million to buy a $15 million building with some financing, you can raise $100 million and buy 10 buildings, as long as they fit within the parameters that's described in the operating agreement and the associated PPM. Okay. So again, there's a PPM, which describes the business. There's the operating agreement that describes the company. They both have the distributions. In a fund document as well as a syndication, there's an investor questionnaire. You need to be qualified. There's a subscription agreement. There are a lot of questions that are asked of investors to make sure that they essentially understand the risks of the investment and can afford to lose all of their money, and that's got to be very, very clearly stated. And then once they commit, you have a fund. Whether they invest their money right away or they are committing to invest their money, if you do what's called a capital call, they are allowed to then keep their money. They invest it when you need it, but you still have the flexibility of just going after property when you need it. That's a competitive advantage that a lot of investors are using now, since it's such a competitive environment, to make sure that they have the cash ready to buy, put down deposits, to do capital calls, and not have to raise a syndication when they find a property. That allows them to get in sooner, and then they can usually do the financing even after they purchase.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot across, especially
Yes.
in the hot markets. They're paying cash actually, and then
Yes.
financing the property after they own it.
We're seeing that a lot, and we're also seeing something different this year. This is kind of a market issue, but we're seeing a lot of deals falling out of escrow. As last year it was beginning, we began to see a trend, but this year we've seen a number of deals where a buyer comes in, they negotiate a price, whether before or after they sign the purchase and sale agreement, they begin to renegotiate the deal, especially afterwards, before their due diligence deposit goes non-refundable, and these properties fall out of escrow 2-3 times. And each time it falls out of escrow in an environment where interest rates are going up, the price is coming down because the borrowing for the money is getting a little bit more expensive. And so, unfortunately, for our seller clients, they're seeing these properties suddenly not going down in price, but they don't have the ability to just go up normally as they had done in the last couple of years. For our buying clients, they're finding a new opportunity to retrade and a little bit more leverage than they've had for the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of an increasing trend in transactions that we're seeing.
While you were talking, I really wasn't listening that well. I was thinking about
No one does.
Yeah,
it's
your
fine.
attorney's rambling on.
No,
here's something: is what if you've raised a fund?
Yes.
And your target, is there tax implications if you're doing multi-states? How does that work?
The tax implications are within the fund itself in terms of how you are deploying the capital, but each investor has their own tax ramifications based upon the state that they're domiciled in. Right. So it's not a tax issue with respect to the investment itself, it's more of a tax issue with respect to each investor. LLCs are what are called flow-through entities, or pass-through entities, and so the revenue passes through the LLC back to the individual investor. So whether the LLC is, let's say, a Delaware LLC, but the investors from California, they're still going to be subject to their local tax law where they're domiciled, where they file their taxes.
Okay.
I just made that up.
That's all right.
You can edit that out.
Yeah.
The made-up part.
What else? What else can we do?
What else do you want to hear? Like to sing a few songs for you.
You
Yeah,
can sing a
fine,
few
yes,
songs. I mean, I don't know. I'm very fascinated by all this. For me, what I found,
I know this
yeah.
that's great information.
Well, no, because the thing is, it's like a fund. Like, you know, because my mother owns commercial real estate. She does multifamily, but she didn't set up an LLC. I mean, it's all owned by her. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's
good
so,
God.
yeah. I mean, like, even now, I'm like, Mom, you need to watch this video because,
Transfer it.
Yeah,
Transfer it.
it's one good trip and fall, and
Yeah, transfer it. I mean, look, even if the property is insured, you don't want to be the individual that gets sued. And also, if you're the borrower on the property, because usually there's a borrower, you don't want to be the individual that has all of the liability. So the best way of structuring it from everyone's standpoint, frankly, and the lenders tend to require it, is that the LLC buys the property, owns the property, and is on title. Then the LLC is the borrower to the bank for the loan, and then the individuals behind the LLC, usually the majority interest holders, will sign what's called a bad boy guarantee, or in some states they're called good guy guarantees, but essentially there's a guarantee which is limited to giving incorrect information to the lender or defaulting on the loan or other things. Otherwise, the property is simply secured by the collateral of the real estate. And in certain states, there's something called a one-action rule, where if the lender goes after the real estate, they can't go after the borrower. So the way it's structured really needs to be considered by a real estate attorney before the property is purchased. If the property is already in the name of an individual, it can still be transferred. And generally, if the ownership of the entity, at least in California, is the same as the individual, let's say it's 100% owned by your mom in a new LLC, then there will be no tax reassessment upon that transfer. So in various states, there are different rules as to when taxes are reassessed. It often has to do with transfer of properties. In California, it definitely does. And in that case, you want to look at whether or not a transfer will trigger a tax reassessment before you take any action. That is an unwelcome surprise that you do not want. So that's why you need to get an attorney involved.
okay, passing this video along to my mom.
See? See?
Okay, that was great information.
Great information. That was great information.
Again, if you have any
Call
comments,
him.
yeah,
I don't know
comments,
anything.
call me
He
too.
wrote it all out.
Comments,
Don't know. Yes.
reach out to us. We'll hook you up with Andrew. Actually, we can put a link if you want, direct link.
Put a link.
Okay, I'll put a link. We can direct link.
Call
You
the
can
link.
get hold of
Right.
Andrew if you have any questions in general. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you later.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.